Spencer, what can I say? From day one, I knew you were something special.
Imagine this. You're lying in your own bed, in your own home, behind locked doors. Your children are sleeping peacefully in another room. And then, someone pulls the trigger. No broken windows, no forced entry, no weapon left behind. Just silence and two bodies. This is not a horror movie. This is what happened to Dr. Spencer Tepp and his wife Monnique in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors live close together, where gunshots should have been heard. But nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything. And the person who did this? They walked out as quietly as they came in. How is that even possible? Spencer and Monnique Tepp were living what many would call the American dream. Spencer was a dentist, respected, reliable, the kind of man who never missed work without notice. His colleagues described him with one word above all others: dependable. He was the person you could set your watch by, punctual, professional, responsible. Monnique was a devoted wife and mother, building a life alongside her husband, raising their two young children in their modest home on North 4th Street in Wyland Park. They had been married since 2021, just weeks away from celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. Their wedding video shows smiles, vows, the promise of a future together. There were no public disputes, no restraining orders, no police calls to their home. From the outside, everything looked normal, stable, safe. But behind closed doors, something was about to shatter that illusion forever. It was a Tuesday morning in Wyland Park when the first red flag appeared. Not a gunshot, not a scream, but an absence. Dr. Spencer Tepp didn't show up to work at Athens Dental Depot. For most people, that might not raise immediate alarm, but for Spencer, this was unthinkable. His co-workers tried calling him. No answer. They tried calling Monnique. No answer. By 9:03 a.m., concern had turned to worry. A welfare check was requested. An officer arrived at the home on North 4th Street at 9:22 a.m. He knocked. No answer. No obvious signs of distress from outside. No forced entry visible. The officer left. A long pause. But the co-workers and friends, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At 9:57 a.m., another call came in. This time, someone reported hearing children inside the home. Children, alive, but the adults still unresponsive. Then at 10:05 a.m., a frantic call shattered any remaining hope. A friend could see through a window Spencer's body lying next to the bed. When police finally entered the home, they found a scene that would leave more questions than answers. Inside that modest home, Dr. Spencer Tepp and his wife Monnique were dead. Both had been shot. Spencer multiple times, Monnique at least once in the chest. But here's where this case becomes truly haunting. There was no sign of forced entry. None. No broken locks, no shattered windows, no damaged frames. The doors and windows appeared completely intact. And the weapon? Gone. Whoever did this walked in somehow, fired multiple shots, and walked out, taking the gun with them. In a residential neighborhood where houses sit close together, where sound travels, where gunshots are usually reported, nobody heard anything. But perhaps the most chilling detail of all, the children. 2 small children were found alive and unharmed inside that house. How long were they there with their deceased parents? Were they asleep during the shooting? Were they in another room? Police haven't said. What they have said is that this was not a murder-suicide. That rules out one explanation, but opens a door to far more disturbing possibilities. The investigation that followed raised as many questions as it answered. Police confirmed there was no forced entry, which immediately narrows the scope.
In homicide investigations, lack of forced entry usually suggests one of three things. The victims knew the person who entered, the door was unlocked, or the perpetrator had access, keys, knew codes, understood the layout. But police haven't clarified which scenario applies here. They haven't said if the door was locked or unlocked when they returned. They haven't disclosed whether fingerprints were tested, whether security cameras existed. What they have released is limited. Spencer was shot multiple times. The difference in wound counts between him and Monnique raise questions investigators typically consider early. Was one victim targeted first? Did the shooter move through the room? Were the victims awake or asleep? Long pause. Authorities haven't released that information. They also haven't clarified the order of events. And perhaps most critically, they haven't released an estimated time of death. That leaves a window stretching across many hours. The shootings could have occurred late at night, early in the morning, or sometime before coworkers noticed Spencer was missing. Each possibility carries different implications. If the deaths occurred hours before the welfare check, that suggests the shooter left long before police arrived, long before anyone knew what had happened, moving freely, undetected, invisible. And then there's the welfare check response itself. This is where the case takes an uncomfortable turn. When the first officer arrived at 9:22 a.m. and received no answer, protocol typically allows for discretion. Officers must balance privacy with safety. No response doesn't always justify forced entry. But when a second call reported children inside the home, the urgency changed dramatically. Yet nearly 40 minutes passed between that first welfare check and the discovery of the bodies. A long pause. Could earlier entry have changed anything? Police haven't said. They haven't indicated whether the children were in immediate danger during that window. They haven't stated whether medical intervention could have altered the outcome. What we do know is that by the time police re-entered the home, Spencer and Monnique were already gone. And the person responsible already vanished.
Here's where this case becomes even more unsettling. There is no suspect. No arrests have been made, no person of interest has been named publicly, no vehicle information released. Police have not issued a public safety warning, which could mean they believe the threat is contained, or it could mean they simply don't know enough yet to make that determination. For the residents of Wineland Park, that uncertainty weighs heavily. Is this an isolated, targeted act, or could it happen again? The lack of forced entry suggests this wasn't random. Random killers break in, they force their way, they leave chaos. But this was controlled, deliberate, executed with precision. That level of control suggests planning. It suggests the shooter knew the layout of the house, knew when the family would be home, perhaps even knew where the bedrooms were located. Knowledge implies familiarity. Familiarity implies access, and access, that's the question that haunts this investigation. Public speculation has naturally filled the void left by official silence. Who had access to the Tepp home? Family members? Friends? Service providers? Anyone with keys, codes, or familiarity? Police haven't disclosed whether such a list has been compiled, or whether individuals have been interviewed in that context. Some wonder about Spencer's professional life. As a dentist, he worked closely with patients and staff, but there have been no public allegations of disputes, threats, or workplace conflicts. Others question whether this could be connected to something in Monnique's background, though police have not discussed her work or social connections. Financial motives? Personal vendettas? Jealousy? Without information from authorities, the community is left to wonder, and wonder, without answers, breeds fear. The truth is, when a crime happens without forced entry, without witnesses, and without immediate suspects, anything becomes possible in people's minds. That's why transparency matters. That's why communication, even difficult communication, becomes essential. From a psychological standpoint, the profile of this perpetrator is deeply troubling. This was not a crime of passion. There's no evidence of a struggle, no furniture displaced, no signs of chaos. This was calculated. The shooter entered quietly, fired multiple shots in a confined space, avoided the children, removed the weapon, and exited without detection. That requires composure, control, the ability to commit extreme violence while maintaining enough presence of mind to clean up, to leave, to disappear. It suggests someone who either planned meticulously or someone who has done this before. The fact that the children were unharmed adds another psychological layer. Were they intentionally spared or simply not encountered? If they were spared, that suggests the shooter had boundaries, limits, a code. If they weren't encountered, that suggests timing, precision, luck. Either scenario points to someone who knew enough about the household to minimize variables, and that is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. Autopsies were conducted on both victims. Spencer Tepp was confirmed to have been shot multiple times. Monnique Tepp was shot at least once in the chest. But the details beyond that? Withheld. Police haven't released trajectories, distances, or whether either victim showed defensive injuries. Those details help distinguish between a sudden ambush and a prolonged encounter. They help determine if victims were awake or asleep, if they saw their attacker, if they had time to react. The silence around these details protects the investigation, but it also leaves families, friends, and the community suspended in uncertainty. Even without the weapon, forensic evidence matters. Shell casings can indicate caliber, manufacturer, sometimes even the type of firearm. Police haven't publicly confirmed whether casings were recovered or how many shots were fired in total. Each omission, each gap in public information adds to the sense that this case is far from resolution. As of now, there is no court verdict, there is no case resolution, there is no justice. The case of Spencer and Monnique Tepp remains open. Their children, now without parents, represent both the tragedy of what was lost and the urgency of what still needs to be found. Truth, closure, accountability. The investigation continues quietly. Evidence is being processed, interviews conducted, digital footprints analyzed. But for the public, the most important facts remain unknown. Who did this? How did they enter? Why did they kill? And perhaps most importantly, are they still out there? Somewhere in Wineland Park or beyond, a person walks free who knows exactly what happened in that bedroom. They know how they got in. They know why they pulled the trigger. They know where the weapon is now. And they're counting on silence, on time, on fading memories to keep those secrets buried. But cases like this don't just disappear. They linger. They demand answers. They refuse to be forgotten. Because behind every investigative file, behind every unanswered question, there are real people grieving. Colleagues who remember Spencer's reliability, friends who recall Monnique's warmth, and two children who will grow up asking why. So here's the question I leave you with today. When a family is killed in their own home with no forced entry, no weapon, and no suspect, what does that say about safety? What does that say about the systems we trust to protect us? And what would you do if this happened on your street? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, when silence follows violence, asking how is not suspicion, it's responsibility.